It's an honor to sing that to my friend, Richard Probst. Richard Probst and I have known each other for a long time. I'm picking this up because look at all these hearts, Richard. I'm going to put these over here for you. Richard and I have known each other for a long time, and then you know how it is on Facebook, and you look and you see something, and Carolyn is friends with Richard, and I'm like, how do you know Richard? And we ended up figuring out that we both know Richard, but from two different worlds. So anyway, this is Richard Probst, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. Yeah, you have energy. I was lying there in my end of the hallway hospital room where I had just been admitted the night before following a week-long episode of dehydration and exhaustion that wasn't responding to outpatient intervention. Now, I was no stranger to health concerns. I was already a paraplegic double below-knee amputee. I was born with spina bifida. I was a veteran of over 50 surgeries. But I hadn't been inpatient for over 30 years, up until my admission to St. Francis just before Thanksgiving 2019. I had been told that my hospitalization would likely only be overnight to allow for IV fluids. But you know, I could tell in my gut that this illness was different. And as the lab started coming back, my perceived minor dehydration had become a life-threatening case of dehydration. Serious infections that were threatening my heart, and exacerbation of a chronic leg injury that had led to severe swelling and more infection. Now, after 30 years of relative stability in terms of my health, I had long defied the odds. I was already well past my life expectancy. I was living independently, working full-time. I was vibrantly active. A mere 6 weeks earlier, I had just completed my 30th anniversary itinerance tour, a long-distance wheeling event of nearly 190 miles over 3 days. I had to laugh at one point as while I was hospitalized, I could be seen on Fox 59 receiving their Community Hero of the Month award. Yet there I was. I was lying in a hospital bed. I was too exhausted to move. I was too sick to even turn myself over. Because I had been falling during the previous week, I was identified as a fall risk. Complete, you know, with that big bold sign they put up on the wall. Yeah. There was a mat right beside my bed, just in case I fell out of it. Now, I tried to laugh about it, but I knew that they were right. I was embarrassed, but I knew I had no way to argue that I was okay on my own. And as the lab results started pouring in, my expected stay lengthened, and suddenly IV fluids were joined by IV antibiotics and various other medications. It became apparent to everyone that I was much sicker than anyone had realized. For 30 years, I had fought to be fiercely independent. I had fought I could do the everyday things like shower and clean and cook. Actually, okay, I'm lying about the cooking. Yeah. I've always eaten out at restaurants, pretty much every meal. But I could manage my life. I could manage my health concerns. I mean, oh sure, I had that occasional person who would come over and provide some natural support. But my life was my life, and I was fiercely protective of that. I had built a life around ability rather than disability. I was in control, or at least what I thought was being in control. I knew how to treat my infections. I knew what to do to avoid pressure sores. I avoided medical care like the plague. I mean, I would go when I absolutely had to. But I refused to establish anything resembling a consistent relationship. I was in control, and I refused to allow anyone to see my most vulnerable truths. As I was lying in that hospital bed and the lab started pouring in and the nurses started gently nudging me to be more open and to be more honest, I clung to that control like my life depended on it. They didn't need to know that I used a catheter. They didn't need to know that I had continence issues and was secretly terrified that my body was going to explode at any minute, thanks to all these fluids and all these hardcore antibiotics. They didn't need to know that my best friend and only physical support had taken her own life 5 years earlier, and I'd never found anyone to replace that physical support. They didn't need to know that I had already been struggling with caring for a leg that would get infected, get better, swell up, reduce in size, and it was growing more and more difficult for me to manage. They didn't need to know that I'd put all of my energy into my professional life because that was where I really shined. But when I got home, I was struggling. They didn't need to know that at that very moment I had a pool of blood on my living room floor, body fluids all over my bedroom from having been so sick in the days that led up to hospitalization. But I had been too scared to tell anyone. They didn't need to know that I had a history of sexual assault, and any kind of intimate examination or care sent me off into flashbacks. They didn't need to know that I had body image issues because of childhood abuse that left me scarred and damaged, and always questioning my physical worthiness. They didn't need to know that. They didn't. They didn't need to know that I was scared. Really, really scared. I was scared that the life that I had worked so hard to build was about to go out the window. They didn't need to know that I was scared of losing my job and my home and my friends and this world that I had created that I loved. I really, really loved it. They really didn't need to know. Except they did need to know. They needed to know because, quite simply, they couldn't love me back to life if they didn't know. And so I told them. Filled with truth-telling and giving them my honest history. But I would be lying to you. Instead, it was the awkward kind of truth that comes rushing out of you when IV fluids meet IV antibiotics, and all that water that they'd been telling you to drink, they all work that body-flushing magic. And before you can even think to ask for help, you are surrounded by the kind of hardcore bodily fluid truth that you can't possibly hide from yourself or anyone else. And they needed to know. They needed to know that I needed help. They needed to know that I could no longer handle this alone. They needed to know that I was hiding and scared and embarrassed. And I was so sorry that they had to deal with this. It was gross, and I felt gross, and I hated every single minute of it. But they needed to know. I don't know if it was God or the universe or my not-so-secretly rebellious body, but my body told them, and then I told them, and when Adrian walked into the room, and I assure you, betrayed me. And then she did something that I had somehow forgotten over the years that I even needed. She nurtured. She showed up. She looked at the truth and didn't turn away. She looked beyond what I would let her see. She did something. I would call it love, but I'm almost 100% certain she would call it simply being a nurse. Whatever it was, there was something about it that reached me as I was lying there in that bed, feeling hopeless and helpless and wondering where my life was going and what this all meant. She found my secrets. And I mean, trust me, she found all of my secrets. She needed to know about the half dozen pressure sores that I didn't even know I had. She found other scars and sore places and skin rashes that I'd just gotten so used to I wasn't taking care of them. And she wasn't the only one, would be in my room oftentimes multiple times a shift because those IV fluids and those IV antibiotics continued for 10 days. And those body fluids raged out of control that entire time. I apologized every single time. Eventually, I confessed my history as a victim of sexual assault. And the only admonishment that I got was, "Why did you wait so long to tell us?" "We need to know," Kelsey said, who would prove to be one of the several delightful aides, some of the most delightful aides I've ever experienced. Now, I would love to tell you that all of this ends with some Hallmark Channel happy ending. But I think you and I both know that sometimes in our life, our Hallmark Channel turns more into the Lifetime Channel. It's not always pretty, but somewhere within that messiness, it's still pretty darn holy. Within 5 days of hospitalization, it was obvious my body was healing, but my left leg was not. I wasn't yet out of the woods in terms of infection, but the numbers were headed the right direction. But the leg itself had gotten so heavy, it was taking 2 people to dress it and care for it and treat it. Within 48 hours of a consult with a vascular surgeon, my leg would be gone. It has been a little over 8 weeks since that above-knee amputation of my left leg. Not yet returned to work. Only this very week, I had my amputee clinic appointment that serves as kind of that benchmark of transition between healing and building strength. I'm awaiting the arrival of a new wheelchair. I'm exploring transition to an accessible van, something I had long avoided, but something that I now see will actually prolong my independence. After a stay at an acute rehab was denied, I was discharged to home over the Thanksgiving Day weekend, still struggling with those dastardly IV antibiotic side effects, still uncertain about transfers. I was sent home, a home where I live alone, with some home health support and a very blurred vision about my future. My natural confidence and optimism were intact, but I was afraid. It has always been true in my life. I found holiness every place that I turned. From Reverend Anastasia, an intuitive Unitarian Universalist minister who self-identifies as atheist, but who reminds me of God's presence constantly, to the anesthesiologist who, with remarkable observation skills, saw that I started having a flashback right before the surgery. When she placed that mask right up near my face, instead of moving forward, she stopped, reassured me, and waited for me to go to sleep before bringing back the mask. To the delightful Libby, yet another wonderful aide who has this loud southern drawl, and she greeted me upon return to my room post-amputation with a, "There's my all-star." There was Tori, a 22-year-old aide who has a sister with spina bifida and seemed to instinctively understand my body. I mean, seriously, she noticed everything from weird rashes to pressure sores to dry nipples. Can I say nipples in a church? I did. Okay. You really haven't learned until you had an aide look at you and say, "Your nipples are dry." rich, deep, and vulnerable acts of giving, support, and authenticity. These people took me at my weakest moment in many years, a time when I experienced life-threatening illness and significant limb loss and couldn't even manage my own bodily functions. And they literally, I will say, loved me back to life. They nurtured and empowered and cleaned and cared. Now, I wanted to chalk it up to, that's what they're paid to do. But I think we all know when a caregiver goes above and beyond. And these people, many of these people went above and beyond over and over and over again. I had spent so much time over the past 30 years trying to be independent and trying to be in control and trying to prove my ability that I had forgotten, and I am truly embarrassed to admit this, but I had forgotten that I could be loved and nurtured and cared for as is. In all my glorious quirks and weaknesses and vulnerabilities and needs, I had accomplished amazing things in life, and I certainly don't want to respect that ambition and strength and resilience and perseverance. But when I look back now, I realize just how true it was that I had allowed shame to get the best of me. And that kept me, and that kept my body from living the life that I truly deserve. Complete and utter helplessness. And it's not over yet. And I don't want to sugarcoat the experience. I don't want you to think I'm grateful for amputation. I'm not. It sucks. I don't want you to think I'm grateful for life-threatening illness. I'm not. I don't want you to think I'm grateful for missing 3 months of work, because I wouldn't wish the last 3 months of my life on anyone. But here's what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for what I see as one of the great biblical truths, a truth that, if I'm being completely honest, I tend to be really good at forgetting, that we are made in God's image. I was reminded of this scripture and what I consider to be this truth one very uncomfortable morning as yet another of the aides arrived at my room to help me clean up once again, and I proceeded to express disbelief that she could be so kind and so nurturing every single time. "We're all made in God's image," she replied. "You deserve to be treated like it." She finished up her tasks, left the room, and I quietly sobbed in my hospital bed. I'm grateful that I believe in a God that reaches us, all of us, where we're at, and that all of us are made in that God's image. Whether we're black or white or Hispanic or short or overweight or able or disabled or gay or straight or trans or rich or poor. I'm grateful that I was made in God's image when I was born with a hole in my spine and little chance of survival. I'm grateful that I was made in God's image. My third amputation, healing emotionally and physically and being surrounded by people who remind me of my value and my worth. And that leg or no leg, I'm still quite the badass. I don't know if I can say that in church either, but I'm grateful that when I look around this church that meets in a dinner theater, that I see God's image everywhere I look, regardless of your theological beliefs, political persuasions, ethnicities, or wherever you're at in life. I'm grateful that love is stronger than hate, and that people like you and I prove that every day when we go through our challenges and our illnesses and our losses and our traumas, and we choose to rise up anyway and live and love and reach out and affirm and empower. I'm grateful for the people who built me up over the last 3 months and the friends, old and new, who've shown up in my life over those 3 months and reminded me that I could show up as is and that I didn't need to build up those walls. I'm grateful for the people who saw everything that I felt was embarrassing, and instead of humiliating grateful for those who cleaned up the pool of blood and the body fluids and who helped me learn how to take care of myself in my new physical circumstances. I'm grateful for a God whose presence is known through the people made in his and her image, and I'm grateful for the myriad of ways that I can show up in a body that needs love and support and care and receive all of these things while still being seen as holy and strong and made in God's image. Life is not easy. You know that. I know that. We cannot and we should not ever minimize the traumas and the dramas that we each experience. And the sacred gift is to companion each other through them. May we realize the gift it is to become vulnerable for and with one another. May we embrace the privilege of recognizing the image of God in each of us in our times of joy and in our times of sorrow. You are sacred. You are holy. You are beautiful. You are always, always, always enough. And you deserve to be loved. Peace be with you. And I do thank you for welcoming me so warmly into this space. And so it is. Amen.